Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast series brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. My name is Iqbal Sevea and I am the director of the Institute of South Asian Studies. And I welcome you today to our podcast titled India-Pakistan After Pahalgam, India's Strategic Objectives. On 7 May 2025, India conducted military strikes on what it described as terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan. These were in response to a brutal terrorist attack in Pahalgam, Kashmir, in which 26 civilians were killed. India has long accused Pakistan of training and supporting Kashmiri militants. While New Delhi has asserted that the strikes were part of an anti-terror operation and stressed that it did not target military and civilian installations, tit-for-tat military responses resulted in India and Pakistan becoming embroiled in the most intense and wide-ranging conflict since the War of 1971. Although a ceasefire has since come into place, the military exchanges have given rise to numerous questions on the security and geopolitical landscape in South Asia. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Ambassador Jawed Ashraf, a distinguished diplomat with over 3 decades of experience in international affairs and governance, to share a perspective from India into the developments that have occurred and their longer-term implications. Ambassador Ashraf joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1991 and has since held a series of important diplomatic and policy-making roles across the globe and within India. His overseas postings have taken him to Frankfurt, Berlin, Kathmandu, and Washington, D.C. He also served as India's High Commissioner to Singapore from 2016 to 2020, and most recently as Ambassador to India to France and Monaco from 2020 until 2024. In New Delhi, Ambassador Ashraf held key roles in the Ministry of External Affairs, including as head of the Americas Division, and served as Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's Office, advising two Prime Ministers, Dr. Manmohan Singh and Mr. Narendra Modi, on vital portfolios such as foreign policy, defense, national security, atomic energy, space and science, and technology. With a wealth of diplomatic experience and deep insight into India's external engagements, Ambassador Ashraf brings a unique perspective to today's conversations. And I'm particularly delighted that Ambassador Ashraf is reconnecting with ISAS. We have fond memories of interactions during his time in Singapore. So, Ambassador Ashraf, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the podcast, and it's wonderful to reconnect with ISAS. I have, of course, great memories of very sustained and intensive engagement with ISAS, some great debates, discussions, and events. So I'm really happy to be, in some sense, at least digitally, back in Singapore.
Ambassador Ashraf, let's start the discussion with the strikes that India conducted in Pakistan and the consequent tit-for-tat military actions. In the early hours of May 7th, India carried out missile strikes on 9 sites in Pakistan. This was in response to a terror attack on April 22nd, in which 26 tourists were assassinated in the Indian hill station of Pahalgam. Amongst the sites hit by India in these strikes were locations in Punjab. Economically and politically, Punjab is the most important province of Pakistan. It's also the province from which much of the military is recruited, and it is home to the military's headquarters. Now, this is, of course, not the first time that India has conducted airstrikes in Pakistan in the wake of terrorist attacks. In 2019, India conducted an airstrike in Balakot, which is in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, following a terrorist attack in Pulwama, Kashmir. The recent strikes do, however, signal a strategic shift. Ambassador Ashraf, I'd like to have your opinion on what were India's strategic objectives in the recent strikes, and how does the government think it fared?
Well, first of all, I wanted to point out that, you mentioned in your opening remarks that India says that Pakistan trains and supports or sponsors terrorism against India. This isn't just what India claims. This is a widely recognized internationally, because, as you know, many of these groups, such as LET, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and their leaders are either proscribed by the United Nations or are on UN Security Council 1267 Sanctions Committee. So it's a globally recognized phenomenon which has been going on for more than 3 decades. And we have, over the course of 3 decades, have had not just a sustained pattern of cross-border terrorism against India emanating from Pakistan, but we've had some major terrorist events, including the Mumbai terror attack in November 2008, the Parliament attack in 2001, the Kaluchak massacre in 2002. We've also seen Uri in 2016, Pathankot earlier in 2015. And then we, of course, had in 2019 Pulwama. Now, during the course of these 3 decades, we have tried every means, bilaterally as well as internationally, to bring about a change in Pakistan's policies, get it to dismantle the terrorism infrastructure, banish these groups, eschew its own support, financing, training, sponsorship, and completely stop this policy of cross-border terrorism against India. We've gone to the UNSC, we've gone to the FATF, where Pakistan was on the grey list. We have engaged the international community, but there hasn't been no change in Pakistan's behavior. And if you recall, just a few days before the attack in Pahalgam, which is a symbol of tourism in Jammu and Kashmir, and this was the start of the tourism season, the Chief of Army Staff, General Amir Munir of Pakistan, had made a rather obnoxious statement on the two-nation theory based on two religions, the incompatibility of two people living together, Kashmir being in the jugular vein, and in a sense, both expressing a very aggressive posture, but also almost sending a signal, a cue to what then unfolded in Pahalgam just a few days later. So this is the context in which we have seen is a gradual escalation in our response. After Uri in 2016, by the way, in 2016, early January, when we had the Pathankot attack, what we did was unprecedented and was a reflection of our sincerity to build a relationship of peace with Pakistan, was that we had actually invited the Pakistani security agencies to jointly investigate the attack on the Pathankot air base, and they actually visited the Pathankot air base, which was a reflection of our sincerity and earnestness, but there was denial, obfuscation, complete rejection of any role of any of these groups from Pakistan. So that is what has led to a lot of change. So in Uri, we had the surgical strike. After Uri, after Pulwama, we had a single strike on Balakot, which was meant to be a signal to Pakistan. And of course, on this occasion, we had both a objective of securing justice for the people and of who lost their loved ones in this most heinous attack, in which male Hindu members were identified on the basis of religious symbols, and they were shot dead in front of their families. And the families were told to go and convey and narrate this experience to the Prime Minister and to the people of India. So it was a grievous attack, not just on the families of those who were killed, but it was also a grievous attack on Jammu and Kashmir and the peace, prosperity that it is seeing, and on the entire nation, and which is why India has stood united behind this. So the response that you saw served first the objective of justice. Second, as Prime Minister had said, we have to bring the attackers, perpetrators, planners, backers to justice. So which is why our attack, military targeting, was just on those terror sites which are well known, including Muridke and Bahawalpur, which are the headquarters or one might say the global nurseries of terrorism. And this was one. The second was to send a clear message of deterrence to Pakistan that anytime you sponsor or support terrorist activities in India, this is going to be the kind of response that you will see, that we will target the terrorist camps since you are doing nothing about it. We will hunt the terrorists anywhere in Pakistan, that there is no longer the security shield of the Pakistan military on the terrorists, and that there was going to be no place to hide. Because if we can get to Muridke and Bahawalpur, which are the most protected and sites in Pakistan, the pride of Pakistan Army, then we can get you anywhere. And this was then further enunciated in the doctrine laid by the Prime Minister. Now, if you recall, we simply said after the attack on May 7th, at these 9 terror camps with visual evidence of what we had achieved, that we did not touch the civilian sites, we did not touch military installations, and that we had achieved our objective and that we had no intention to further escalate this problem. Now, when Pakistan chose to respond on the night of the 7th and 8th, they were targeting our civilian and military sites. And that was a declaration of war against India, because we have a very careful only to go with precision strikes on terror targets. And then when we told them that if you continue with military action against India, it will be met by proportionate non-escalatory response, but we will maintain the dominance on every ladder of escalation that Pakistan goes on to. And then on subsequent nights, you saw that they had raised the level of attacks on our civilian cities, military sites, foiled very successfully by our impregnable air defense system, an integrated multi-layered air defense system. So they kept trying to raise the pitch to get one major target in India. And when they realized that we were able to hit back when they tried to raise the level of attack, and we were able to get 11 out of the 12 Pakistan Air Force air bases, also neutralize the air defense system, command and control system in certain places, that they then sought both to speak to the United States, but more directly approached us for a truce, because they had a choice at that point in time. If they had continued escalating it further, the response would have been even stronger from our side. And we were prepared for it. With their resolve was very clear. So when they said that, we would like to have a truce, we said we had achieved our objectives. We've been saying from the beginning that, we do not intend to escalate it from our side, but we will respond if you do. So we said it's fine. We can bring about a pause in what was called Operation Sindoor, which was, of course, very symbolic. But we remain in a state of readiness, preparedness. Our force posture is there to be able to respond quickly, swiftly, and decisively if there is any particular attack. So this was both the objective of serving justice, but also a message of deterrence, amplified in a very clear way in a new doctrine on zero tolerance for terrorism, which, as you saw, Prime Minister, when he addressed the nation, spoke about.
Ambassador, you pointed out that, or you mentioned that India was prepared. What was the risk assessment? How far did India consider Pakistan willing to go? And how far was India willing to go?
Well, every military campaign has a certain set of objectives. There are no such things as open-ended military campaigns. So our objective was very clear. We wanted to hit at those who had killed people of India, destroyed families, ruined lives, and who had sought to incite a war of religion in India. So that was our objective, and we achieved that. Now, it also showed that we were prepared for an acceptable level of risk in any response that Pakistan would have pursued. Now, too often, what you see is a tendency for Pakistan to raise the nuclear alarm and for the international community to buy into it. I think you've seen that it's a false alarm. It is meant to, trigger some sort of international mediation so that Pakistan can say, oh, we were able to achieve a draw, or we were able to inflict damage on the enemy or adversary, but we were stopped by the international mediation, and also serve the objective of, rehyphenation of India and Pakistan, or which is in their minds, it cannot happen in real world, or to re-internationalize Jammu and Kashmir, which is something which they have failed to achieve over the past so many decades. So we were also aware of their limitations. And we also know that, and as you've seen, the Prime Minister said that for the last 25 years, they have been using this sort of a nuclear bluff. we call it this time. All of you also see that in the Ukraine-Russia war, that people had, Russians had on a number of occasions said that we will use the nuclear option if the red lines are crossed in Ukraine by the Western countries. Those red lines were crossed repeatedly, but Russia did not exercise the nuclear option. These are not war-fighting instruments. These are really guarantees of state security or state survival or existence. And there was nothing that we were doing which was threatening the existence of Pakistan. We were achieving our objectives. So we were also, and they're also aware of our capabilities. So we knew that there is enough space in the conventional domain for further escalation. And we were very sure that if it had escalated further, we would have achieved overwhelming dominance on the sea. We would have prevailed in the air, and we would have inflicted a very strong blow on the ground.
Ambassador, apart from the military strikes, Operation Sindoor is not viewed as a standalone operation. It seems to be part of a broader and longer term attempt by India to pressure Pakistan. These longer term attempts range from attempts to diplomatically isolate Pakistan to cutting off the water supply. Notably, India has stated that it will hold the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance. Now, for those of our listeners who may not be that familiar, the Indus Water Treaty is essentially a treaty that was agreed in 1960 and has regulated the sharing of waters between India and Pakistan. Both India and Pakistan have abided by the terms of the treaty, and the water continue to flow even during times of war. Ambassador, can I ask you to explain what exactly does the holding of the Indus Water Treaty in abeyance mean, and how does India see this as a strategic leverage?
Well, let me say that the Indus Water Treaty, which was signed in 1960, was in some way imposed on India during the time of the Cold War, when Pakistan was the favorite child of the Western world. And it was, in a sense, World Bank had a role in it. But if you see the contents of the Indus Water Treaty, which most people haven't read, you would see that it was weighed heavily in favor of Pakistan, even though it is a lower riparian state. There were a lot of opposition even then in India to this Indus Water Treaty because it was extremely prescriptive. It almost straitjacketed us, and it left very little flexibility for India if Pakistan raised any kind of objections to even exercise its own rights under the Indus Water Treaty. Now, over the past few decades, we have seen that Pakistan has been repeatedly obstructing the exercise of India's legitimate rights under the Indus Water Treaty by raising all kinds of objections and seeking either the arbitration or the nuclear or the neutral expert provisions to resolve these issues, and that delays indefinitely projects. Look, in the last 3-4 years, we've also sought a review of this treaty with Pakistan, to which naturally they have not responded. Now, so many things have happened. First, if you read the preamble of the treaty, it basically, this treaty is premised on some sort of normal, good neighborly relationship between India and Pakistan. That is not the case. We've had wars, but also 3 decades, 4 decades, first in Punjab and then in Jammu and Kashmir, also in rest of India, repeated use of terror as an instrument of state policy in Pakistan. So that fundamental premise of the treaty doesn't exist. The second point is that over these 6 decades, you've seen climate change, you've seen changes in discharge in the river, demographic changes, technical changes, the different needs have arisen. And therefore, any treaty should be subject to a review after 60 years. Ironically, in this treaty, unlike most treaties, there were no sunset clause, no exit clauses, and it reflects what kind of the treaty this is. So, and the final point I wanted to make on this is that internationally, there is nothing binding on countries to have such kind of prescriptive, restrictive, and in a sense, inflexible, legally binding treaties for transboundary rivers. Most countries don't have this kind of treaty. China is an upper riparian state for so many countries. It doesn't have this kind of treaty. You have normal agreements on sharing water flow data. You talk to each other when you are having some sort of a activities on the river. But do you think China will consult us when it wants to divert the river on Brahmaputra or wants to do something on Sutlej upstream of us? So we had actually given up a lot and got nothing in return, other than apart from the fact that even in terms of the Indus Water Treaty, we were unable to exploit it. We have decades of unremitting hostility from Pakistan. So we've kept the treaty in abeyance because there is no provision for suspension. There's no provision for sort of a, as I mentioned, there are no sunset clauses, etc., in this treaty. But in effect, what it means is that the provisions of this treaty are inoperative as far as we are concerned. Now, even if Pakistan goes to the World Bank and asks for to facilitate a neutral expert or goes to the court of arbitration, it is not something that we are going to accept. So that's the point. And in the immediate term, it will have direct impact on things like sharing of water discharge, river discharge data, on flushing operations upstream, in the stoppage of what we call regulated flow of water. So there are immediate consequences. We will also accelerate the construction of run-of-the-river projects or storage projects on these rivers, which have been held back because of obstructions from Pakistan. The design of many of these projects was suboptimal because of the objections that Pakistan had raised. We will look at some of those issues. So I think it's a serious, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in his address to the nation, blood and water do not flow together and cannot flow together. And so this is where we are. Now, the choice is for Pakistan to decide whether it wants to continue with a policy in which it defines itself and its existence as an antithesis of India, or in terms of animosity towards India, and certainly by its Pakistan's military, or it wants a normal relationship in which it can benefit from trade, it can benefit from cultural exchanges, and it can certainly benefit from harnessing the potential of the rivers that we share.
Ambassador Ashraf, building upon that question and some of the things you mentioned earlier, would you be able to elaborate about some of the other steps that India is contemplating in the international domain to pressure Pakistan?
Well, I mean, first of all, we, as you know, are going to inform, educate, and make aware the international community about what happened in Pahalgam, present them with clear evidence of Pakistan's direct links inside Pakistan with those who carried out that absolutely brutal and barbaric attack in Pahalgam. In which we will also point out that for 2 weeks after the attack, Pakistan resorted to its usual practice of obfuscation, denial, and accusations of false flag operations. I mean, this is perhaps the most insensitive and callous kind of statement that can be made. We will also present evidence of what we achieved, the objectives behind it, and the clear and unambiguous outcome of the 4-day so-called military action that took place. We will remind the world of the fact that so many terror incidents around the world, so many of them, including in Europe and the United States, have had links that go back to Pakistan, and that Pakistan has taken nothing but cosmetic steps to dismantle its extraordinarily big network of terrorist infrastructure and groups in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And this is something which we have to tell the world is in their interest. We will also inform them that we are prepared to take responsibility for our security and to protect our people and to safeguard our people and to inflict punishment for any terror attacks on our own. It is also, therefore, the onus on the world to make sure that Pakistan actually takes decisive steps, significant, concrete, irreversible, verifiable steps to dismantle the terrorism infrastructure. We will also go to FATF with a comprehensive legal case that there is a direct link between Pakistan state and Pakistan military with these terror groups, that there is absolutely nothing they are doing to stop terror financing, in fact, in some way contributing to it. We are going to the UN Security Council, where there's Resistance Front, an LET promoted franchise, an organization. We have already presented to the UNSC Sanctions Committee dossier on Pakistan's, this new organization that LET had set up. So this is a, 7 all parties group. 7 all party delegations are going to fan out into the world, to across every continent, to carry this message, and that we would demand from the world that if they believe in zero tolerance for terrorism, and that they believe that terrorism should not be subject to dual or double standards, then it must stand resolutely behind India in bringing an end to this terrorism emanating from Pakistan. And it is in Pakistan's interest too, because it's a country that is getting consumed by the fire that it has lit. And we can only see, all of you are studying Pakistan, you've seen where it is headed economically, socially, politically, diplomatically. So this is something which we are going to pursue, not just through these 7 all-party delegations. And when all these 7 all-party delegations are going, what is the message to the world? It isn't that it's our government bureaucrats or diplomats are talking. It isn't that the government is talking to them. It is that the people of India, through their elected representatives, no matter which political party they support, are speaking to the world about this grief, our pain, but also our resolve, and also the responsibility of the world to address this absolute cancer, so to speak, that is spreading out of Pakistan. So this is going to be a sustained, continuous effort.
Will this sustained and continuous effort involve a redoubling of efforts to strengthen relations within the South Asian neighborhood, and also greater outreach to the Middle East and Southeast Asia? I know a lot has been done, but would there be intensified efforts now?
Yeah, there is already an intensified effort. I mean, look, Southeast Asia is one of our key priorities. I mean, as the Prime Minister speaking in the Shangri-La Dialogue in 2018, delivering the keynote address on the Indo-Pacific, had also highlighted both our civilizational, economic, political, and emotional links with Southeast Asia, but also why Southeast Asia is, from our view, the pivot of the Indo-Pacific region. The centrality of Southeast Asia in the Indo-Pacific region was emphasized by him. So that's always a priority. Perhaps if you see the relationship in the metrics of numbers, etc., of trade and finance and investment, maybe it doesn't add up to what you see in some of your other relationships. But in terms of overall trust and confidence, there is a very strong relationship. What I'd like to say is that we will continue to speak, because there are also lessons to be drawn from Southeast Asia, how these countries in Southeast Asia, with different circumstances, different histories, economic development, scale, size, faiths, are able to work together, and move forward on the basis of a common agenda. That's a very important lesson for the rest of the world in these fractured, fragmented times. So Southeast Asia will continue to see that priority. You're seeing a delegation come to Singapore and some of the other countries in Southeast Asia in the next few days. You will, in the Gulf, we've had perhaps the most unprecedented level of engagement ever. And it is the region where our relationship has been the most transformed in the past decade or so. And we're seeing those results. We're seeing the results of the way they look at terrorism, and they look at Pakistan and look at India. And it is also arises from their own experience with radicalism, radical Islamism, and the threats that it poses to their stability and security. So they are empathetic towards it. They understand our point of view. South Asia, unfortunately, at the moment is somewhat in an unstable situation. It is, but always, as you know, neighbors are always the first priority for any country, as it is for Singapore, it is for us, and I think we will continue to invest more and more in South Asia. The conversations are continuous. We do face challenges in the region of integration, of closer cooperation, but I think in the coming days and years, you will see a increased emphasis on South Asia. Much harder because of this constant effort of Pakistan to vitiate the atmosphere, to try and use some of our neighboring countries to continue with its policies against India. But we're prepared to deal with that challenge.
Ambassador, you made reference to domestic developments within Pakistan in one of your answers as well. And I'd just like to pick up on one strand that's emerging. In Pakistan, it seems that post the military exchanges, the military has consolidated its position and emerged as the most powerful political force. Protests against it have ceased. All political parties have acknowledged if I want a better term, the supremacy of the military. How does India read this development?
See, I had written also, even before this military strike had begun, in one of the columns, that every time Pakistan military finds that its stature, its position, its standing, its reputation in Pakistan's polity, its society is eroding, then it usually looks to fomenting trouble with India to shore up its position inside Pakistan. You've seen economic fragility in Pakistan. It has repeatedly had to go to IMF for a bailout. If you just look at the economics situation and compare it with the rest of even South Asia, you will see a very, very dark picture. Now, even Pakistan's internal political situation is unstable. You've seen the most popular leader is behind bars. His party is at odds with the Pakistan military, which is behind this move. It has found it hard to even deal with the Sharif family, or with the Bhutto family, with two other principal actors in Pakistan's politics. Externally, it has been feeling the heat as well. So I think in a situation like this, when they resort to fomenting trouble with India, they are able to project to the people that Pakistan's military is the sole guarantor of the survival, the security, the stability of Pakistan, and then is able to rally people behind them. Some of this rallying the people behind them is manufactured because of the extraordinary power and influence they wield on the society over there. Some of it happens because then in a situation of a conflict, societies do tend to unite behind whoever's leading. And in Pakistan, whether the civilian government is there or the military government is there, it is the military which in some sense always rules Pakistan. So yes, you're right. I mean, in a sense, this was both one of the motives, but also one of the outcomes of what has happened in Pahalgam and then the response that followed. Now, one of the reasons Pakistan is in this unstable political situation, in a state of what I call perpetual transition to a genuine democracy, is because for 6 decades, Pakistan was a frontline state for the NATO in this part of the world. And for the US and for Western countries, Pakistan's military was considered a more assured ally, and therefore was treated de facto as the main ruler of Pakistan. And so all their transgressions, all their omissions, all their activities were in some sense forgiven. Even the coup that President General Musharraf carried out in October 1999 was simply whitewashed because Pakistan's military was needed by the West. So it has created a culture. The DNA of Pakistan now is defined by this. Even today, I would say that if there is a crisis, the Western countries, external powers will simply run to the chief of army staff in Pakistan to solve that problem. They don't trust the civilian democratic forces. And the reason is because they were never allowed to grow in Pakistan, unlike in India or in Singapore or in other countries of the world. So part of this problem of the DNA of Pakistan, of the role of Pakistan's military, which has become so deeply entrenched and institutionalized, and is the source of so much instability in the region, is due to the way the West treated Pakistan's military. And I can, in a longer conversation, I can give you some very specific examples of that.
Your comment provides a good segue to my next few questions, which are going to be about the role of other powers, especially the Western powers, in this crisis. Now, President Trump has, of course, been vocal about the part that he claims to have played in shaping the ceasefire agreement. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also indicated that he was constantly speaking with counterparts in India and Pakistan. What is your assessment of the role that the US played, and how much pressure did it apply on India and Pakistan?
I think we are, as often as President Trump claims credit for it, and I would leave it to the Americans and to his administration to explain why they do so, or to the conversations they've had with Pakistan. As far as we are concerned, there was one conversation that Vice President Vance had with Prime Minister, where he was told categorically that if Pakistan fires, we'll fire back harder. And then after the US had a conversation with Pakistan, then Secretary of State and Acting National Security Advisor Marco Rubio had spoken to our NSA and our External Affairs Minister to convey what the Pakistan was thinking about. And we said, look, there is only one channel of communication between India and Pakistan. We don't need third party. We don't entertain third parties. And that channel of communication is the Director General of Military Operations of both countries, who have a hotline that is active 24 hours. Based on that, we got a call. I mean, our DGMO got a call from Pakistan's DGMO saying that they wanted to stop this military activity, wanted to de-escalate, and that's why we agreed to it. So any references that he may make or credit that he may claim, I don't want to get into that. That's for him to decide why he says it. We have simply, and government has quite categorically rejected any third-party role, both in the outcome as well as in any future India-Pakistan dialogue, conversation, or any kind of a standoff. So so this is a strictly bilateral issue. We want to keep it that way. This was also part of the similar agreement, and we never had on any of the previous occasions that I spoke about, 99, 2001, 2002, 2008, and some of the more recent ones in the last decade, any third-party role in bringing about an end to or cessation of any hostilities or mediating any ceasefire. So we are very clear about it. We've been very clear about it, and that remains our position.
Ambassador, finally, I'd like to turn to the China factor in this story. There's a fair amount of speculation about the role that China played, from the nature of support that it extended to Pakistan to the use of military hardware. Operation Sindoor and the subsequent military exchanges that took place in a context in which China has been openly signaling its intent to develop better relations with India. How do you read China's positioning in the recent events?
I think every prime minister, including the two that I worked with, have desired a friendly, cooperative relationship with China based on mutual respect, sensitivity to each other's concerns, management of any differences, and by maintenance of peace and tranquility along the border. Now, part of this is also to build trust. and for neither of us to pursue any activities that hurt the core or interests or security interests of the other party. So, while we see great opportunities in India-China relationship, I mean, two Asian giants, China is growing rapidly, has achieved a great level of development. We are growing very rapidly. In a world in flux, where we see the fragmentation of the global trading regime, the dilution of the international water, trade and technology being weaponized as instruments of competition, dispute, etc. There is an opportunity for India and China to rewire and re-engineer their relationship. But when you see that China provides this kind of unfettered support to Pakistan with regard to military capabilities, strategic capabilities, diplomatic, protection and security, and operational support also, then it makes it very difficult for us to pursue that relationship in a way that we both could with its boundless potential. So I think there is also a need for China to examine and review for itself how much it really wants to build relations with India, what would be its gains, what would it benefit from, and how would the region benefit from it. We have maintained both sides, I have to say, channels of communication through the crisis of Doklam in 2017 and Galwan in 2020. We have continued to have diplomatic, ministerial, and official level communication at different points of time. You've just seen right after the Operation Sindoor was paused, Minister Wang Yi had spoken to our National Security Advisor, State Councillor, sorry, and he spoke also about the need for better communication and exploring ways to enhance our cooperation. But it's a complex relationship, as you can well imagine, and you know it as well as we do, that there are bilateral opportunities that are in some sense stand against bilateral challenges and outstanding issues, but also some of our regional concerns. And we need to have some honest conversations on this if we are able to realize the full potential of the relationship.
Ambassador Ashraf, thank you so much for joining us today. I know there are multiple demands on your time at the moment, but we'd like to thank you for joining us and also for sharing your candid and insightful reflections on what's the strategic and geopolitical environment at the moment. And all I can say is that it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and we look forward to welcome you back on the podcast, but also to welcome you back to Singapore as well in the near future.
Yes, thank you very much. Really, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Always enjoyed every conversation in Singapore. As I've always said, it's the intellectual and strategic hub of that vast and very critical region. So it was always very stimulating to engage in conversations in Singapore, and look forward to being back with ISAS on podcast and in person on any future visit to Singapore. So thank you very much.
You are listening to South Asia Chat. You can learn more about our work by visiting us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get updates on our research and publications through social media. You can find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.